All right, so let's play around with pandas a little bit. Pandas is, like I said, a fundamental data manipulation tool. So we use that a lot in data wrangling. Some of the things that pandas does for us, tabular data handling simply means that it handles data in the form of tables. When you think of tables, you want to think of like a Microsoft Excel, where each row is a piece of data or a record of data. You can think of it if we were doing a phone book for this classroom. Each row in the table would be a person. And so each column in the data might be your first name, your last name, your email, your phone number, your address, so on. So each person would have each of those pieces of data. But when we put data in a tabular format like that or in a table, it allows us to organize and view and do things to that data with relative ease. So Panda can do things like data cleaning and pre-processing. In other words, if I go back to that survey analogy that I was using before, where if I survey everybody in the class and 40% of you don't answer question number 3, what I can say is, let's create a new data frame or a new table of data. And because I can't handle any incomplete questions, let's remove all of the records of people who didn't answer all the survey questions. That's one way to clean your data. Now, obviously, the downside of that is if that's a large number of your people, you're losing data. And anytime you lose data, your picture becomes less clear. Your ability to analyze that data becomes weaker. So data cleaning and pre-processing is literally just getting the data to the point where you can actually make sense of it. You can label data, you can index data, you can change data types. Inside each table column, there's a data type associated with it. One of the things that Pandas does really well that is difficult to do is called time series analysis. Basically, what that means is Pandas understands the concept of time. And if I say 60 minutes to you, that in your mind, you know that that's equal to 1 hour. And you know that there are 24 hours in a day and 365 days in a year. You know those things. So does Pandas. Pandas understands those ideas. If I'm in Python and I try to get Python to tell me how many minutes are in an hour, Python doesn't know. Python understands the integer 60, but it's just 60. It doesn't know 60 what. Pandas knows, if I say 60 minutes, Pandas knows what the equivalent number of hours is to that. If I say, take this date and add 3 weeks to this date, it understands what that means. If I say something happened in Eastern time zone and something happened in the equivalent time in Pacific time zone at the equivalent time, it understands how many hours difference that is. So that is all really useful, huge time savers, because otherwise you would have to write functions in Python that do all of those conversions for you. Pandas does it on the fly. And I mentioned this before, but one of the big advantages of Pandas is integration with other libraries, with the visualization libraries, with other analysis, with machine learning libraries. Pandas touches everything, which is really, really useful. The more integrated things are, the more useful they can be. So this is what Pandas looks like when it holds data. It has a data frame. Data frame is the container. It's the name what we give tables of data in Pandas. But each data frame has rows and columns, right? Each row is a record. Think of the phone book entries. And each column is a type of data or a piece of data in that phone book. So your name, your last name, phone number, your email, etc. Every Pandas data frame has rows and columns that allow us to analyze data. A real live data frame might look like this, okay? So you'll notice each row has an index, associated with it. These indexes are created on the fly as these rows are printed out. The columns have labels at the top of them, and each column has its own data type associated with it. So in this one, age would be an integer, and so on. So let's take a look at a data frame. And if I want to take a look at a data frame, I can look at it in PyCharm, but I can also look at it here in my notebook. So let's do that. Okay. So the first 3 lines here, what I'm doing, I'm importing pandas as PD, and I'm using a pandas function called read CSV. CSV stands for comma separated values, and that's a data file that I have on my local computer. That data file, I just had it open, looks like this. The first line is the column names, and then each column has a first name, an age, a city, a state, and a number of pets. I did not create this data file, so don't ask me why they have things like Little Rock, Kentucky, or San Francisco, Indiana. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's just been sort of fictitiously made up. And so that is the data file. And so if I read that data file into Pandas data frame object called df, and then I just print that df, here's what it gives me. Okay, you can see it kind of organizes things. It's not going to print all of the rows in that data file because there are 400 rows of data in that data file. That seems like a lot, but in terms of data analysis, that's kind of small. But we've got the name, age, city, state, pets. You can see it's recognized the headings. It's organized it for me. You can also see that right in the middle of it, it skips from index 4 to index 395. It basically is giving me the first 5 or 6 rows and the last 5 or 6 rows of data, just to show me that sort of a picture of what's there. So you can print the whole data file if you want to, but it's not very useful. But the nice thing about this is that now I can build on that if I want to. That data file is open, so I can do things to that data file down here that allow me to keep this data up here, which I couldn't do if I was doing it this way, right? So if I have that same code in this view and I run it, there's that same thing, there's my data. But now if I want to do something else to that data or show something else about that data, I have to rerun this every time. And it just sort of starts stacking up on me in terms of being able to read it. It's just not a very very friendly user interface for tinkering with your data.